Which one?
The green. Yeah. See if we can speak. Can we hear you?
Hello? What about that mic thing?
Is the mic?
No. I cannot hear anything.
What did you do that?
It's useless. Keep that.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Sharon. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi.
Morning.
What if the iPhone ringtone was made in South Africa?
Oh dear.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Good morning.
Good
This is
morning.
Lee Kutzer. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Morning.
Fantastic. It looks like Sharon is struggling with her audio at the moment. So what we'll do is, I see people are still joining. Sharon, I'm not sure. Well, Sharon, can you hear me? If you can just type perhaps. Perfect. Shall we give it another minute or two, or shall we start away? Okay, I guess let's give it a couple of more minutes. I think whilst we wait for the others to join, if we can just ask everyone to mute their microphones, and if everyone has got video up, just to stop that video, just to conserve bandwidth in case it becomes a problem. We'll see if there's time left at the end of this for questions. I have got a hard stop at about 11 because we've got another European demo shortly after this one. But the contact details will be provided at on the last slide. So do note them down, and you can always send questions either directly to myself or via Sharon, whichever way will be fine. But let's give it a couple of minutes, and then in the meantime, if you can mute your microphones, please. Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. It looks like we got the thumbs up from you to start. Firstly, thank you to Sharon for facilitating this webinar, which I think is going to be of importance to all organizations, and I think very much more so for the contact center industry. Sharon, if you can just give me the thumbs up to see that you can share the first slide that I've put up. So I'm sharing the correct screen and not my presenter's side of it. Okay, if for some reason we do get a slight technical interruption, I think if anyone can just let me know so that we can just rectify that. And then I think we can start away. So just to confirm, everyone's seeing the correct screen and not the presenter view. I said that's all okay. Let's start away then. So welcome and thank you for joining us all. I think very interesting times we are living at the moment. With COVID-19 being a big enough challenge, we also now face POPI Act. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, and it's actually very good news for everyone. We will cover what POPI Act is and how it will change the way that your organization operates. So just very briefly, for those who don't know, I think there's some misconceptions out there with regards to what POPI Act is, but in very simple terms. So the POPI Act aims to encourage the protection of personal information that is processed by both public and private bodies. To do this, the Act will introduce certain conditions that will establish the minimum requirements that businesses must comply with when processing personal information. The Act is also aimed at providing rights to people when it comes to unsolicited electronic communications, and that's a very important aspect. So basically, it's a code of conduct that businesses must comply with, and the deadline is 1 July 2021. Seems far off, but it is around the corner. Just some key terms I would like to introduce to everyone that they need to be familiar with. So the first one is personal information. So what is personal information? It means information relating to an individual. So anything that can identify a person, and there's no set amount of information you need to hold. One or two of them will be more than enough to be classified as personal information. So data subject, that's all of us. It's the person to whom personal information relates to. Now, the responsible party means it's a public or private body or any other person which alone or in conjunction with others determines the purpose of and means for processing personal information, for example, your organization. Now, the information officer, now this is not to be confused with the traditional IT chief information officer. The information officer, as defined by the Act, is the head of an organization, so the CEO. An operator means a person or an organization who processes personal information for a responsible party in terms of a contract or mandate without coming under the direct authority of that party. So, for example, an external payroll company that does the monthly payroll of a responsible party. So in other words, they're doing it for another organization. So why and who needs to comply? Well, why should you comply with the POPI Act? Well, for starters, it's the law. Also, there are benefits for complying with the Act, and we'll cover those in a couple of slides. So who must comply? As I previously said, all organizations must comply, both private and public bodies. So what happens if I do not comply with the Act? Well, it's pretty clear. The maximum penalties are a 10 million rand fine or imprisonment for a period of up to 10 years or a combination of both. Can anyone just let me know via audio if they are still got the slides visually with them?
All good?
Yes, all good.
Yes.
All
Thank
good.
you. Thank you. So what I want to touch on first very quickly is the equivalent of our Protection of Personal Information Act, which is the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation. The reason I want to do this is there's some pretty good data available. They've been or had to comply with the Act since May 2018. So just to touch on the fines for non-compliance with the GDPR is that there's two levels. The lower level will be a 10 million euro fine or 2% of worldwide annual revenue, whichever is higher. And then the upper level, depending on the level of breach, will be a 20 million euro and 4% of the worldwide annual turnover fine. So total number of fines issued as of May 2020 is 273. The total amount of fines is just in excess of 153 million euros. Largest fine that was issued to date was 50 million euros to Google Incorporate based in France. In October 2019, the regulator also punished a German property company with a 14.5 million euro fine for holding on to people's data for longer than was necessary. We'll cover this along with the benefits shortly. So it is real, it is happening. The fines are not there just to scare organizations. There's good material available on the internet to see which industries have crossed the line and have actually been fined. So benefits, yes, there's definitely benefits for being compliant with the POPI Act. Firstly is that you'll be able to prove to your customers and your employees that you are a good custodian of their data. So by giving only the correct users access to the critical data in your business, you should prevent the information from falling into the wrong hands, thus improved data security. And as part of your compliance journey, you'll discover that data that's no longer relevant to your organization, and you can actually start retiring the data. So we all know data have got maintenance costs to it. If it's not relevant, get rid of it, and you will also sidestep any potential breaches in the Act. So during your compliance journey, you will start considering how to improve your network encryption and endpoint security. And as part of your organization, or as your organization's data becomes more consolidated, you will better understand the underlying value of your data, which you can use to engage with customers in a timely and relevant fashion, so allowing for better decision making. Now, how will the POPI Act affect your organization? Well, in terms of data management, it will definitely affect the way you manage your information. You will need to classify any consumer data that you hold and identify whether it constitutes as personal information. You'll also be required to identify any records and sensitive information you might hold. So remember that there's a different criteria for handling personal information and non-personal information. And it will also affect the way you notify stakeholders. So third parties will have to be notified as soon as possible if there's a privacy breach and if personal information is compromised. Now, where do you start? POPI doesn't tell you how to do this. The Act doesn't tell you how to do it, but we suggest that people should focus on building a privacy and data governance framework. So POPI requires organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to secure the personal data they process. They must also follow the accountability principle. So this means that being responsible and able to demonstrate their compliance with the regulator's data processing principles, and this can best be achieved via a privacy and data governance framework. So in other words, a formal structure for managing the security of personal data. So what does a data and privacy governance framework look like? Well, it consists of three core pillars, which is build. So you design, establish, and manage a program to ensure effective governance, risk management, policies, processes, and accountability. To implement, you define data needs, identify data processing risks, ensure that data processing is lawful, manage data flows and third parties, address individual rights, provide data security, data quality, and transparency. And under the demonstration side of it, you'll be able to monitor, evaluate. Can we report? Can we just mute that microphone, please?
Okay.
So you need to monitor, evaluate, and report on compliance, control effectiveness, risk, and maturity. So neither of these is a one-off exercise. Each requires continuous review for changed operational practices and legal requirements. One topic I want to address very quickly and briefly is data security versus data privacy. So we do get this a lot when engaging with customers first time around. They say, no, our IT and our network and everything is secure, but data security is about access and protecting data from unauthorized users through different forms of encryption, key management, and authentication. However, data privacy is a part of security, but it's related to the proper handling of data, how you collect it, how you use it, and maintaining compliance. So security is not privacy, and privacy is not security. We'll jump on to how does the POPI Act fit into your existing governance, risk, and compliance framework. So because POPI Act compliance spans all three of these components, and it also extends beyond cybersecurity, there's three core business areas whose integrated efforts are necessary to achieve compliance. So that will be legal, which will then include defining what's in the scope of POPI Act, where a company has vulnerabilities, and if data is being used properly, along with making sure everything is in order from a contract standpoint. So this will be your operator contracts and your data sharing contracts or your information sharing contracts. Then from a technology point of view, that will be your IT systems, services, and technology must be configured to protect customer data and be in compliance with outlined regulations. And then security, given the hefty financial penalties associated with POPI Act, security systems need to be able to quickly mitigate breach risk. This is best achieved by concentrating efforts related to 6 key cybersecurity pillars, which is data governance, data classification, data discovery, data access, data handling, and data protection. Now, what does all of this mean for the contact center industry? So the first point to note down is that POPI applies to everyone in the organization. So everyone must be made aware of the importance of the new legislation. Organizations must create a team that will look after the POPI implementation. The team must also keep track of customer data and review how it is collected, stored, and processed. Companies can also appoint an officer or supervisor to look exclusively at data protection. He or she must also be responsible for mentoring employees on how to implement POPI Act. So one of the significant changes I think that will come with the implementation of POPI Act is that businesses must give a valid justification for their need to record calls. I'll touch that or on that in the next slide. So POPI also creates an immediate need for contact center supervisors and managers to understand the new legislation completely. Companies that choose to outsource their call centers must keep in mind that call centers are the operators. Thus, companies must check that their respective service providers use systems and processes that comply with POPI Act, because the outsourced or the company that's outsourcing it will still be and remain the responsible party. Contact centers will also have to secure all personal customer information and employed data as described in the POPI Act. They must make provisions to include the right for customers to be forgotten, transfer the data, and access to any registered data. Therefore, call centers will have to look at data storage and how it can be accessible. Then companies will have to notify customers about data breaches. So according to the Act, you will have 72 hours to notify authorities. So you must have, well, not just authorities, also the individuals involved. So you must have the appropriate tools and techniques to detect and report data breaches. So a significant advantage that POPI Act will provide to the customer is that it will give them the authority to get their data deleted from the companies that have their personal information. Companies will have to do things like performing an audit, maintaining a history of recordings, and keeping track of details on those recordings. The contact center should be able to delete the customer information in the future, upon request, of course. For this, organizations need to be technically equipped and develop multiple channel communication platforms. So under the new POPI Act guidelines, customer will have the authority to access the registered data. So this is by means of what they call a data subject access request. I believe those forms are already on the regulator's website. So by giving the provision to customers to access and alter their own data, companies can build trust and gain public confidence. The DSARs, the data subject access request, I believe you must respond to them within 30 days. And you must make it very easily accessible by means of a link, generally from your company's website, for companies to actually furnish you with those data subject access requests. So very quickly on the call recordings. So businesses will need to justify call recording in one of the following 6 ways. The people involved in the call have given consent to be recorded. Recording is necessary for the fulfillment of a contract, or it's necessary to fulfill a legal requirement, to protect the interest of one or more participants. The recording is in public interest or necessary for the exercise of official authority. Recording is in the legitimate interest of the recorder, unless those interests are overridden by the interest of the participants in the call. So for contact centers which currently state that recording is for training or quality purposes, the main area of change will be around gaining consent for the individual. So I think right now contact centers should be working on recording policies and defining their needs and working out how they will obtain the consent of the individual. Quick example, if you ring Microsoft support, although it's a US-based company, they do now, the first thing you hear is not just for training and quality purposes, but you've got the option to press 1 to opt in or option 2 to opt out of call recording. So the other aspects that you will have to keep in mind is that advisors will have to be taught about POPI Act compliance. They will no doubt have to be trained in key aspects of POPI Act, such as how to deal with request to access personal data, consumer request to correct such data, the consumer's right to be forgotten, and how to gain consent to use personal data. So the good news is that we are here to help. And there's various ways on doing your compliance and achieving it. We do find some organizations, and we are dealing with large organizations at present, some of them in the healthcare with European counterparts. They are still using spreadsheets, which makes it impossible for them to track their compliance. There's various ways to doing it, but we prefer using software as a service. So using a tool to manage governance, risk, and compliance enables you to create and coordinate policies and controls and map them to regulatory and internal compliance requirements, which in turn will determine the technology stack required. Using a tool or a service helps to keep it all in one place. And in all of this, throughout your journey, is that collaboration is key to managing it. So I'll very briefly touch, we are not doing a full demonstration of the platform, but by means POPI Act 365 was first developed to be collaborative. The workflow allows you to assign responsible individuals to specific tasks, and it provides you reminders of your compliance deadlines or specific items for deadlines. It allows you to review and a means to see and chase the status updates with regards to various compliance tasks. But most importantly, it was made to be intuitive so that learning it takes no time, and the focus can be on managing a data security program and achieving compliance. There's quite a few aspects that needs to be covered to manage governance, risk, and compliance. If we look at the compliance areas themselves, there will be consent for direct marketing, IT and security, HR and recruitment. Then you would also need to look at your governance and your policies. For that, there's provision made for employee training, which is all demonstratable, managing data used by operators. If your organization is big enough, you need to carry out privacy impact assessments. And very importantly, and this is going to be very tough for a lot of organizations, is managing their data subject access requests. Companies are going to be inundated with these, either out of spite, because you've called an individual 10 times in a week, so they've got the right to submit a subject access request, and you need to respond to that. But again, the platform provisions or makes provision for you to actually log those subject access requests, which if it comes to an auditing phase, you can 100% demonstrate that you have dealt with those subject access requests. So subject access request will either be for access, objection, deletion, or correction. But we do provide guidance with that. Same with the security compromise management. You cannot hide behind a data breach. If you've had a breach on your network or an employee's laptop was stolen and you believe there's data on there, well, good practice will be to encrypt that laptop in any case. But if there's been a breach and something you believe has gone missing, report it to the regulator. It's going to catch you out at some stage. But again, we take and we make provision for a full incident report with regards to the security compromise management. So in brief, just to recapture, personal data belongs to the individual. Organizations are entrusted with information on a consensual basis. The information is used purely for the purpose it has been given. This information must be protected and not put at risk of theft and abuse, and organizations using information must respect it. I think people need to keep in mind that POPI Act compliance is not a destination, but it is a journey that will last the duration of your corporate existence. Our contact details are there. Note them down. If any of you need assistance, even if it's just to ask a question or would like to know more about the platform and how we're assisting organizations to achieve their compliance, please do not hesitate to contact us. We will be more than happy to assist. Sharon, it's a shame that your audio, I don't think your audio is working. I'm just looking at some of the feeds coming through. Nothing there. Moving to the cloud. See more. Are there any questions? We don't have a lot of time for questions, but are there any questions? I don't know if you want to type those in the comments box, and I'll see if we can get round of them. Yeah, Matthew, I agree with you. If you want to post those questions in the chat, I can quickly have a squeeze through them. Okay, I see that there's a question from Omar about implications for working from home for consultants. That will probably not so much be a POPI requirement or any legislation around that. However, the key thing there is security. So we've obviously with COVID seen a lot of companies moving people out the office space into their homes, and that's where you need to have a very thorough IT security and use policy. The biggest problem with people working remotely will, of course, be the bring your own device. You know, are they using their own equipment at home? Do we have, do you have VPN connectivity to your offices? And that will all put data at risk. So that is very, very, very important to note, is that security comes into play when consultants are working from home. Let's just go back. What about the recordings? Now, yes, very good questions, Sharon. I think you're referring to the consent about the recording. When you all joined, I believe you would have seen that by joining it, Teams have cleverly put that in there to say that you give consent, and they had a link to their privacy notice on there, which will probably be pretty thorough. I've not looked at Microsoft's Teams privacy notice, but I'm sure that that they have catered for that. Was a capacity for our government for enforcement. Margie, very, very good question. I actually had a chat with the CEO of the information regulator, and it goes hand in hand with how government, how do they enforce, or how does labor enforce health and safety at work? It's really down to having the number of inspectors available. So, which is why nobody has been appointed as an official auditor. So the Act states that everyone needs to comply. I really think where it's going to come into play is the scenario of it won't happen to me. But also, as soon as you start dealing with bigger corporations, they will require you to have POPI-friendly operator contracts in place, and you will only be able to produce those contracts and agreements if you've achieved compliance. So part of the platform and one of the services we offer in there is, as you build or go through your journey in your compliance, there's quite a few places where information is captured in terms of your data mapping for your organization. I mean, that's the whole heart of POPI compliance, is data mapping. And by you mapping your data or creating a data inventory, whichever you want to call it, it gives you a view of a risk, and you can only manage risk if you see it. So by using the data mapping information, the platform produces your privacy notice, both for your internal, for your employees, and your external parties, so to the public. And it also produces a required PIA manual, which, as part of that notice, it will state the type of information you collect, the lawful basis according to the Act. So there's various lawful basis for processing information, which you have to state. So that will only be produced if you've achieved compliance. So you're absolutely right. Government's capacity to enforce it, probably none. But in hindsight, if you do get a data breach and they do investigate you, that's where you'll be caught out. So if you cannot demonstrate any compliance, you will really, really struggle then. The average is smaller. Oh, hang on, let's do it. Yeah, you got a point there, Margie. So the smaller guys, so let's use, I don't know, probably a plumber or an electrician, someone within the trades industry, it's himself and two or three people that's working for him. He will probably fly under the radar. But in terms of a contact center, obtaining leads or a campaign from a responsible party, it will still fall back to that responsible party, because the contact center will ultimately be the operator, and the person supplying this contact center with campaigns or leads will still be the responsible party. So it will come back to someone eventually. What does it mean that you were able to contact clients which give you consent directly to you? Yes, correct, Brendan. It's all about consent. They will probably look at it from the Act's point of view and saying, right, you phone someone once. If they object to it there and then you've got to process that objection and the right to be forgotten. So I guess it's going to be pretty much a strike one and strike two, and that's it. There won't be a strike three. So everyone's got a right to go and complain and lodge this with the regulator, which is why you would need to present to the public or anyone you can potentially contact a means for them to submit a data subject access request. You cannot ignore it. Let's see what else we got here. I'm looking for the question. Regarding the question for moving to cloud, which is actually a valid question, Rajan, but I would like you to drop me an email. There's a heck of a lot of information with regards to that, and if any of you is concerned with where you are, where your service provider is based, in terms of the solution providers, please drop me an email. It's unfortunately not a quick conversation. You would need to look at the DPAs of those companies. For instance, Dropbox, Google Drive, a lot of corporations use them. They are based outside South Africa, but you need to look at the data processing agreements. But I would really like, for anyone who's got a question about their hosting partners or where the solution is, just to drop me a line on that, and then I can engage with you on it. These chats are coming through fast now. Let's keep what about a second party? Outsourcing. Customer doesn't opt into the report. Is that when you want that on the report? Well, we've got a question here about a customer who doesn't opt in to be recorded. Does that mean that we can't carry on with a call, or can delete that call from recording loss? So it's going to be based on different scenarios, whether there's a lawful reason. So especially now with COVID, you can't go into the bank to sign your finance agreements. So F&B must record that call, and they will go through the terms and conditions, and then you will consent to it that way. So that's obviously a lawful basis for someone to be recorded. But if there's absolutely no reason, apart from it being for quality and training, which is not going to work anymore, the customer would have the right. It's all about offer and acceptance. You're saying that you're not going to be recorded, so I guess you're going to decide whether you want to, proceed with this call or not. If the customer doesn't give consent, and it falls by the wayside of any lawful and justification reason for recording that call, then you've got to proceed with that call, if that's your mandate in terms of whatever it is you need to sell to this person, a service or a product. But yet they would have the right of not getting recorded. Where are we now? So these are coming a bit fast and through. Sharon, do you think you can collate all of these questions? I'll see, maybe I can copy them, because I'm running out of time myself. Let me just do a screenshot here of these ones, because there's some pretty good questions, but we are going to run out of time. Let's do that. Let's do that. Sorry guys, I'm just grabbing these questions. I would really like to engage with everyone that's got these questions because they're really good and they are going to affect your organization. You're absolutely right. Just do this. Yeah, I think that's Natalie. Yeah, where are we now? As someone said, can we get answers to these questions electronically? Of course. That's why I say please engage with us via email. If there's more questions, do send them to Sharon or to myself, and then we can have that follow-up session where we can also touch on POPI Act 365 as a workable solution, which I think we can probably demonstrate it better in terms of the capabilities of the platform and actually apply those questions directly into it. That's unfortunately all I've got time for today, Sharon. So thank you very much for everyone attending today. Like Sharon said, there's going to be another one in a couple of weeks. So please don't hesitate to contact us in the meantime. Don't wait for 2 weeks. I'm sure there's a lot that everyone has to start thinking of and start doing before that deadline is upon you. So I'm going to sign off. Charlotte, sorry, I've got to run. Please email me that question if you don't mind. Then I will gladly respond to that. Very quickly before I go, if everyone wants to just get an oversight, that email address again, philip@altair4group.com. That's Philip with 1 L. Then please email me and we'll respond to those questions for you immediately. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you again. I'm signing off and we'll chat soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Philip.
Thank you, everybody.